points so that we can get through the material?
No, look, I wrapped it up. I won't, I skipped through the second half of the talk very quickly, but I won't do the talk because, you know, I think there's material we can talk about, so I'd like to hear, you know, any part of the talk, what people think, and I won't know, I may not know the answers, but I'd like to hear what people think and your contributions. So, Robert?
Look, I'm happy to make a comment. Obviously, schizophrenia has an association with religious experience, and your experience was like I suppose a psychotic religious revelation. And one of these questions about thought insertions is it just a neurological problem in your brain, or do you give credence to the idea that there actually is something from outside you that's present?
Yeah, I can answer this. I think that when consciousness changes, as it does, it seems that the level of consciousness somehow changes in these states, right? And I personally kind of think it reflects something about the nature of reality. It's not just a dysfunctional brain. I thought I wanted to argue for that at university, but I don't need to argue. Like, I thought I wanted to prove that I wasn't mad. This is not a delusion. Consciousness changes, and when consciousness changes, we see reality more clearly, or in psychosis it's very disturbed and confused. But, you know, I don't need to prove that. I want to learn the science. The science is good, and the science has a lot. We can learn a lot from it. But this is what I'm doing my PhD on. For example, I just read a paper, and some people say LSD is heightened consciousness, and think of that global consciousness, like someone in a coma is not aware, someone with a bit of anaesthetic is a bit more aware, and we're all kind of aware, creature consciousness aware at the moment. But you can't say LSD is a higher state of awareness than normal consciousness, because there are these different dimensions. It may give you higher perception and sensation, but your cognitive abilities will be reduced. And there's things like how time is experienced, or so consciousness. I need to learn about. This is what I want to learn about. Consciousness has all of these facets. There are different ways, dimensions, and how does changes to the structure of consciousness affect that first-person experience? And that's what I'm doing my PhD on. So I don't have the answers, but that's.
I suppose one of the issues is that people are diagnosed as delusional when they have these experiences, and yet there's a long spiritual tradition of revelation, of prophecy, of channeling, of like the concept of angels is one example of these old ideas that have been abandoned in the modern world, and yet they seem to speak to people's subjective experience in some cases.
I think the way we deal with psychosis, like often they're religious experiences, and mine happened in my 20s. I had 3 major ones in my 20s. They were all religious. The first one I was 21 years old, and no one talked to me about the experience ever. It was just medication labelled. You're labelled. You take medication, and I think we need to. And people talk about this. I don't know much about it, but you need to put the experience into context for someone, and if that has a religious context, there needs. You don't want to get hubristic. I mean. Or romantic about what a psychosis is. It's very disturbing, it's very disruptive. But maybe if that happens to someone and it's religious, they can integrate the experience a lot better if there's some kind of framework to understand the experience. But in the mental health system, there's no place for the experience because you have a practitioner who's dealing with a biomedical model and they treat with medication, you know?
That's right.
And if you were in an indigenous culture, you would have a shaman for that experience. That's what they would give you, that would be the treatment. Say, you know, North American indigenous or even Aboriginal indigenous, you would have, it would be shamanic.
Yeah. But we're not in that culture.
I know.
So,
Well,
you know,
we're in our own culture, and isn't one of the things that I think many people here have had thought insertion without being considered psychotic. So I've certainly, you know, had something like that, and we're taught to ignore that or to think that's not right or not sane. But I think it happens a lot, and I think that kind of thought insertion, or that sort of thought insertion, will be completely outside the sphere of people who are scientifically dealing with it. I mean, would people that you deal with there, would they agree that there are people, many people I think, who have that kind of external mental experience that aren't psychotic?
Are you willing to give an example of what you mean?
I'll just give my own example, sure. That I had experience of over many years of playing cards with a female entity. I would find cards, you know, like I would find, well, in India, for example, once I came across, I had been doing this for some time, and I had come across a deck of cards. Somebody had thrown away a deck of cards on a rubbish heap, and I thought, oh, they're all face down. And I thought, should I pick up one of those cards? No, you know, because you kind of can say what it might be. But then I walked back, and I picked it up, and of course it's the Queen of Hearts, which was important from the series of cards that I've been dealt. So I think that's not psychotic. I think it's actually probably a bona fide experience of something outside.
Intuitive?
Well, no, it's not. It's actually an entity outside of. It's an inserted thought.
I would say, and I've thought about this before giving this talk, but I think most people who come to Jung Society meetings, have had unusual experiences that they can't fit into a box, that seem to be either unusual unconscious experiences, psychic experiences, you know, experiences that kind of tell them the reality as we normally perceive it is not all there is. There's something else, and you know, we express that in different ways, and that's what you get at Jung societies. You know, a lot of people have those experiences, and what you're saying is this seems to be becoming an external force that is real and tangible, and you know that's my belief. I mean that's how I see reality as well. But and like I said, the science is important, and we know science is important, and it doesn't fit in that reality. And I don't know how you reconcile those things. I think they're like I think David Russell, who I've talked to a lot, kind of I guess just thinks you just hold those two things separately. And I don't know if they can be reconciled, but
Can I ask you just a simple question, if you don't mind, but what has helped you the most?
Jeff?
No, you. What?
Jeff has helped her the most.
Pardon?
Jeff has helped you the most. You're not asking Jeff to answer the question.
No, Jeff has helped me the most. So.
Jeff has helped. So, no, hang on. No, but that hasn't really answered the question, for me at least. What has helped you the most?
Well, okay, meeting some good people.
So in that, what has helped you the most?
Yeah, having good relationships with a couple of mentors who treated me with care and respect, and somehow there was a healing through that, having mentors who were insightful and just sat with me, really.
So it's kind of therapy.
Yeah, it was relationships. One was a therapist and an analyst, a Jungian analyst, and one was a lecturer who people know here, who comes and talks here. And there are two older men who gave me a lot of attention and really just, I guess, reflected to me that I was okay. You know, there was nothing wrong with me. Like I was, you know, good. And then I'm quite serious. You know, I met Jeff. You know, which
Okay.
you need to be loved and respected, basically.
Yeah,
You need the right support from people who care about you and love you. I think there can be far better outcomes of mental illness if people, you know, people develop it early, they don't get to finish their educations, they don't get to develop independence away from their family, they are low on the socio-economic ladder because they can't work, they're medicated to the eyeballs, plus there's all this stigma in society that tells them they're worthless, which they internalise. And that's not the symptoms. None of that is the symptoms. You know, it's not the illness. So there are all these reasons there are bad outcomes. Whereas, you know, if you just love and respect people, you know, I don't want to disclose something, but I know someone whose son had an episode, psychotic episode, really supportive father, no one judging him, you know, took a while to recover, back at uni, and it's just a little bump, a little hiccup, and we'll go on, is intelligent, is, you know, I don't know,
And the interesting thing with psychotic episodes is that if the person's had that, then a lot of people around them will maintain that stigma or whatever it is and not believe that it is just an episode. It's part of life and you grow through that. But they will then retain an image of that person not being all right, normal. And that's a pity. Well, it's probably helped. It probably happens with all sorts of people who have, say, a brush with the law or whatever it is. Oh, he's had that. He'll never be right because he's had that episode with the law or whatever it is. You know, same as psychosis.
yeah,
Stigma.
Do you still have thought insertion?
we were talking about this outside. I get it when I'm falling off to sleep, but it's and they sound louder and clearer like recordings, and sometimes it's random or sometimes it's saying something to me. It's just a sentence,
Right.
but they don't disturb me. But they feel, you know, they feel weird, but I don't. I'm not worried about. They're not a problem.
Because you've got supportive surroundings around you.
Yeah, but for whatever reason they're not disturbing. But if you were someone who was getting these thoughts, like people get voices which are I was saying, hearing voices, I think, is just a louder version. Thoughts are more subtle. It's
Yes.
kind of on a continuum. But if you're getting voices that are saying really horrible, bad things to you, you know, I mean, they're people that live with these voices, and I don't know much about it, there are hearing voices groups where people learn to live with their voice. People have voices just all the time, and they learn to live with them, and some of those voices are really nasty and horrible, and, you know, and I think there are, I don't know much about this at all, but I think there are kind of therapies where people try to get them to engage with the voices, and you know, and there are hearing voices groups. You know, I don't need to be part of that. It's not something I have, but there are kind of groups that meet of people who hear voices all the time, and different ways of treating, or not treating, or learning, you know, different ways. And there are people who are on medication who still hear voices. You know, the medication, it sedates you, but it doesn't necessarily stop the symptoms for people.
True. And this PhD that you're doing with people who are definitely on one side of the fence, if I can put that, and don't want to hear about Jung, etc. Do you find difficulty with that? Because
No, I think they're wonderful. You know, I just feel so privileged. I think it's one way of thinking, but I think it's wonderful, and it's that rigorous methodology, like the fact that you have to kind of get through that. I mean, and the stuff that they learn is really good stuff, like cognitive science, and you know, that I think it's wonderful.
Okay,
I think it's wonderful, but as Theodora and I were saying, you know, you also know the soul is important, and you can't just kind of be in this. This stuff is all really wonderful, and I want to learn it, but the soul is important, and you can't not have that.
You can't identify it as a technological or scientific thing, so...
No, I don't even, you know, I wouldn't even know how to define that, but I think it's something that I think it's something you feel, or you know.
Or something you know it from the first person point of view. There is no debate at all. Something you know the soul.
Yeah. I think you recognise when, like has Terry left? He's gone. Oh, Terry, God, sorry. Sorry, Terry. I was talking to Terry, and I was arguing this kind of uni stuff, and I, you know, I believe it, it's really good, but I could hear myself arguing and getting more kind of, and he's just sitting very calmly and peacefully, and I could just hear my voice just going, you know, and it's just like, you just kind of notice the difference, you know. So.
Jung is a really interesting case study with his Red Book and Fileman. You know, I would consider his channeling of Fileman, as he describes it, to be like an example of thought insertion.
Yeah. He personified these parts of his personality that seemed unconscious. He brought them into consciousness by personifying them and dialoguing with them. You know, he created a dialogue with these kind of, and
So, but was Fileman a part of it himself, or did Fileman have some sort of autonomy in his subjective perception?
So you're talking, when you say channeling, you're talking about the collective unconscious and, you know, can we hear voices or have experience of kind of archetypal beings that are outside our own consciousness, that come from something that is a bigger container than our personal...
Well, that's the traditional belief which modernity rejects.
Yeah, okay, well... It's quite I can quite simply answer that I agree with you, that I think that's the case. I do think that things from somewhere bigger, but you can't, in this stuff that I'm talking about, that you do at uni, you can't argue for.
Well, you can't quantify that sort of stuff. There's no evidence for it.
You can't quantify it.
Well, not in any modern scientific way.
Yeah. No.
Like it's a very subjective experience.
Yeah. These are the two parts of me. I agree with you. I mean, that's, you know, I'm a Jungian card carrying Jungian.
I mean, there is somebody who talks about combining these things of science and of Jung and the philosophy that I've come across only recently for myself, but a guy called Peterson. He is amazing, to me at least. I mean,
What was the name?
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson. He is, I think he is, well, you know, I mean, I'm not religious, but he is the Messiah in that, from what I've seen, because he's been able to do that. He's been able to provide a way of understanding the collective unconscious through biology, through evolution, through actually the understandings of Jung, the understandings of modern science. And I think he really does represent, and it's still, you know, an arguable thing about where that division between, you know, what people, well, what you believe, you know, what you sense, what you believe, all these different aspects of it. But he tells a great story. I mean, it's just riveting, just as Jung does. I mean, he just tells a great story too.
I'll take the name later.
What's the name? Yeah.
Google him. And
You don't know about Jordan Peterson? Well, yeah, to me, he's a phenomenon. I mean, that's almost what I'm here.
Lessons of Life.
Sorry?
That's the book.
That's
The
one.
book?
And the other
Jordan
one's next
Peterson.
of me.
12 Lessons of Life.
Well, there's one book, but he has about 200, 2.5 hour videos on YouTube. But he's just
He's an
absolutely,
academic,
he's a full-blown academic, yeah.
Okay.
but he
okay.
explains things, I think, in a way that Jung would be happy with.
Well, he's a Jungian. He calls himself a
Yeah.
Jungian. And he loves Jung, he loves Nietzsche, he loves Dostoevsky. I mean, he says, these are my inspirations. These are the things that I've come, these are what I've tried to build upon to be able to come to a connection. But basically, because what's always worried me, I mean, I have an interest in psychology since I was an undergraduate, which is a long time ago. But he, and it was, this thing of the collective unconscious was just, you know, well, what the is that? It's like, you know, it was just being and as I am a hardcore physical scientist, it was like, okay, what, you know, where are we going here? And even if you can't measure it, could it in a Gedanken experiment be measurable? You know, which is a different thing.
Did you
a
say
different thing
Gedanken experiment?
A thought experiment.
Oh, thought experiment.
Oh, that's the German term, Gedanken.
Oh, sorry. Okay. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I,
I'm sure that's what Jung might have said, because he spoke German, or Swiss, which is a bit different. But no, he really is quite an incredibly...
Okay, I'll look him up. I will say that as I said, I have to engage with the literature that's, you know...
Because he's there's this thing called depth psychology, and you had Hillman up there as well, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
So Hillman is kind of one of these people who've sort of taken what was there and sort of built upon it, and what Jung probably didn't have was that sort of technical basis of like talking about biology, because the way that Jordan Peterson talks about the collective unconscious as being sort of built in to that very first life form that existed on Earth 3.5 billion years ago. And it's a riveting story. You know, it's amazing. Anyway, I'm truly out of my depth here, because I'm not a psychologist at all. I'm just a sort of I love knowledge.
Yeah, no, not at all. Theodora's written the name down, so I'll have a look.
He's a bit notorious. He was on Q&A last year.
Oh, sorry,
no, because he has this very, very, very strong kind of precision and force in his arguments. It's a bit
Perhaps
like...
you could give us a presentation one time.
Yeah,
Schedule for next year.
Oh, me? No.
Yeah, next year. We'll double you.
Shauna,
yes,
Shauna, have you heard of a book called Too Much Anger, Too Many Tears? It was written in the 70s by a husband and wife, and she wrote her version of it and he wrote it.
Yeah.
She, at uni, she went through psychotic periods. All of a sudden was dumped into mental hospitals and given shock treatment. Went on for about 10 years. And she was an absolute zombie at the end of that time. And he writes his version and she writes about her experience sort of simultaneously in the book. I've got a copy of it at home. And anyway, but in the end, he suggested it, so her parents were told that they'll give up on her, leave her in an institution. There's nothing anybody can do for her. And then for some reason, he said, well, we go to Paris. And she was always good in French, and they went to Paris and she became quite normal. And it turned out in uni she developed a fear of failure. And that's all that started it, as the only cause of it. And this fear of failure, the more that obvious that she was a cop case and mentally this and that, the more she became nothing, lost all confidence in herself.
I think there's a lot of trauma, I think.
And anyway, what snapped her out of it was going to Paris, because French was her favourite subject. And she was good at French, and there she could be herself. And nobody knew her history or her background. And she became perfectly, she's now lecturing around the world. And so, at uni, she developed illusions about an octopus being under her bed and all this sort of thing. And to her, it was very real. And 10 years went on for all this treatment. And from absolutely her brain, where you think that everything in her body is being destroyed by all this medication and shock treatment and stuff. And she became normal again.
You talked about the woman who we've seen the talk you gave, and a woman who was...
You mean the client I had with schizoaffective disorder?
Yeah.
Who, well, Jenny has been with me on many workshops I've run in the last few years, and she's absolutely amazing. She had had an incredibly bad psychotic breakdown at 46, and I can tell a story to her, she's given me permission to. And I met her when she was 54 in a nursing home. That's where they put her. There was no hope for her whatsoever. And she was just like a vegetable. She could hardly talk. And I think that just what Mary was saying, I think I listened to her. I said, come and, she was in a group, and there were other people in the group who were having a go at her. And I took her out of there. I said, come over to my office, let's talk. Tell me about yourself. She said, nobody's ever asked me that in 8 years. What,